Welcome to the Iron John podcast. In this episode, psychotherapist, writer, and soul activist Francis Weller speaks on emptiness, primary or soul satisfaction, and people's disconnection from other humans and from the rest of being in modern society. If what the soul wants is not found, if the promises we made before we were born are not kept, the resulting sense of emptiness and the attempt to fill that void will devour the earth. As the poet Kabir said, "Do you believe there is some place that will make the soul less thirsty? In that great absence, you will find nothing." This talk is from the 2025 Fall Minnesota Men's Conference, Men Who Stand Atop the Old Mound of Miracles. To get more information about Minnesota Men's Conference events, go to www.minnesotamensconference.com. And now, here is Francis Weller.
My talk, I'd like to call it At the Heart of All Our Sorrows. Okay, that's what I'm going to be talking about, at the heart of all our sorrows. It's a kind of grandiose thought, but I can't remember who said it. If you're going to talk, don't stop until you can really exaggerate enough to get the point across. So I'm exaggerating. I have no idea this is at the heart of all our sorrows, but it's certainly a big factor in our sorrows. So as many of you know, I've been sitting with grief for many years. As a psychotherapist, it's impossible to get away from it. Because every story that comes in the room is saturated with sorrow, right? Whether it's childhood traumas or divorce or addiction or whatever it is, there's always grief attached to the story. So after 43 years of that, you get to understand that this is an essential part of our work. And then for the last 25 years, leading grief rituals, you hear every kind of sorrow, the suicide of a child, or the death of a child, or divorce, or every kind of grief comes in the room. And so you become very familiar with the litany of sorrows. But today I want to talk about something a little bit different. And I've never given this talk before. I've been interviewed on this thread before, so this is a little risky edge for me to share this with you all. We'll see where it goes and see if it lands. I want to take that chance with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this thread has been haunting me for many years. I remember, well, I'll get to that. So it's something, again, one of those things I can't get away from. And I think you'll see why it's so important and how much it beautifully picks up the threads in the stories that Robert shared this morning. You can probably see this, better light, but... So this is the piece that I want to kind of bring to our attention that it's deeply affecting our society. And I remember Danny Deerdorf once saying, "Don't call it a culture, because it ain't. This is not a culture. We live in a kind of a disparate society, but we have no cultural things that bind us together." And that's part of the trouble we're in. So the thread I am following emerges primarily out of white Western ideologies. And I say that very particularly because this is kind of at the heart of our sorrows. And they continue in a very powerful way to affect where we are and what's happening in our collective body at this point. And what I'm saying is at the heart of all of our sorrows is a profound and consistent experience of emptiness. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about emptiness as it relates primarily to white society and the inheritance of that emptiness that goes back probably close to 2,000 years. Okay? So again, that's why I'm the party guy. And I want to get a sense that this emptiness is so ubiquitous, we don't even know it's there. It's so much a part of our life in this society, we don't even notice it. Because we are so adept at covering it up. We are so skillful as a society at finding ways to distance ourselves from the experience, from the recognition, that for many of us, what we feel on a daily basis is some sense of emptiness. I mean, I'm just curious, if anybody in here ever felt a certain hollowness, a certain emptiness in their being? That's quite a few. Yeah. Now, one of the biggest problems with that feeling of emptiness is that we personalize it. Like somehow, I'm empty. Like I did something wrong, or I failed to do something. And consequently, this emptiness is a reflection of personal failure. If I had done it right, I wouldn't feel this way. I wouldn't feel empty, I wouldn't feel hollow. So this emptiness has a way of showing up both individually but also societally. So the symptoms that show up, one of the ways we could begin to sense that this is an issue that we have to address, is that on an individual level, there's frequently a felt sense of lack, that I'm not enough. I've got to do more. I have to keep proving to you that I'm worthy of belonging. I remember having a conversation with Maladoma years ago when we were teaching together about how in his village, it was the role of the village to impress, quite literally, into the body of every child that there was someone welcome, wanted, and needed. And he said, you inverted that 100%, 180 degrees in your culture. That it's up to the individual to prove to the community that there's someone worthy of being tolerated. And we spend a lifetime trying to shape a self that might get tolerated out there. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
And when we are obsessed with that kind of interiority of, rearranging the furniture inside of us, we lose that. We lose the world. You get what I'm saying? That interiorization of our attention and our consciousness means that we're withdrawing libido, we're withdrawing life force from the world, and that intimacy gets broken. And that's also part of our emptiness. When you lose the world, you get empty. There's frequently a feeling of shame around this emptiness. See, the emptiness is not a neutral state. It's not like, oh yeah, there's an emptiness there. No, that emptiness is almost always filled with a quality, a feeling of shame, of worthlessness. Often leaving us lonely, disconnected. There's this lovely phrase by a Native American teacher, Rowan White, where she says, we are all suffering from the diaspora of disconnection. That we find ways of disconnecting from one another. Even, when I've done many weekends with people, but I've also done year-long trainings in Village Mound. It's as if, even when we're together in a community, we're a collective of individuals in the community. It's hard for us to get into Village Mind and to begin to think that the village is me, I am the village. So frequently we think like, do they like me? Am I acceptable? Did I impress you enough to be let in? I mean, I spent decades of my life trying to figure out how to be liked. Turning into a confession. Testify. So I don't know how many years ago was this, but I spent, before I really recognized and really accounted for this feeling of emptiness that was existing underneath the shame, I fell into an 18-month, I wouldn't call it a depression, but it was an 18-month descent into confronting this emptiness. And it was the most difficult 18 months of my life. I wept every day. I didn't know what to do. But because of my grounding in soul, I actually trusted what was happening to me. I couldn't control it. I couldn't tell you to this day why it happened, but I can tell you what it did. It felt like I was being cleared out from some deeper ground to be able to hold more of what is happening around us. So that confrontation with that emptiness was profound. And it also began to sharpen my eyes to see how much this emptiness is covering now most of the planet by the extension of white culture. I'm not here to bash white culture, but I am saying that we have to look at this. Because if we don't, we'll continue to do damage. I was at a racism workshop in Berkeley probably 20-some years ago. And just by the luck of the seating, I was the last one to share why we were there, our name and all that, kind of like we did last night. And when I spoke up, I said what my name is, and I said, I'm here, part of what's really drawing my attention is this issue of emptiness. And this black man quite literally leapt out of this chair and pointed at me and said, that's it. Until your people address this issue, you're going to continue to kill us every fucking day. And you're going to continue to steal from us every fucking day. And it was like one of those, impressions into my body that I can't look away from this. I've literally been trying to write an essay on this for probably 10 years. It's the hardest piece I've ever tried to write. I don't want to write it. I don't want to look at it. We are the happiness culture. We're the have anything you want 24/7 a day culture. So we're always trying to find ways to skirt around the edge of this empty feeling. Does that make sense?
All too much.
All too much, yes. There's an obsession. Let's again back to the individual symptoms of this. There's an obsession with continuous improvement. Again, proving ourselves worthy and adequate. Anybody here ever been in therapy? Two of you.
Two others. Everyone else is a liar.
Everyone else is a liar.
Fine therapy.
Well, most of therapy is an attempt to reshape the self for provability. When people come in with into my practice, which I'm now retired from, when they used to come in, there would be this urgency to change, but under that urgency was self-hatred, based on this feeling of emptiness and shame. That how can I present to you if I feel empty inside? So we're left again with manufacturing something that's approvable. And that obsession with improvement and change comes directly out of that place. I feel I've got nothing in here. There's nothing worthwhile. And the other thing we're done, for individuals is a constant obsession with increase and success. I'm sure many of you have heard the name of Alice Miller, a psychologist, psychiatrist from Germany. She wrote Drama of the Gifted Child and For Your Own Good and others. She said success is the hollowest form of meaning in our life. It's the hollowest form. So again, success, why do we value success so much? Why is that so valuable in our society? I mean, the primary values that we have are power, rank, privilege, wealth, status, material gain, and achievement. We praise these things. We think those are the things that we should be aiming for. We don't see them as symptoms of emptiness. We have forgotten what the soul truly requires. What it is that we were shaped by over 300,000 years to shape us into true human beings. What really matters to the soul, what I call the primary satisfactions. These are all secondary satisfactions. And the thing about secondary satisfactions is you can never get enough of them.
The problem with secondary satisfaction is it doesn't fucking satisfy.
Exactly right.
Danny Deardorff.
Danny Deardorff. Yeah. Secondary satisfactions will never replace what the soul truly wants. But because we don't know what we really want anymore, and we're trying to compensate for this feeling of emptiness, we are devoted to these secondary satisfactions. You know? And addiction is another one of those symptoms of the emptiness. How can I anesthetize this feeling? I don't want to feel empty inside. And any addict, you know, if you could define it as never having enough of what you don't really need, whether it's alcohol, cocaine, or whatever it is, sex, or whatever it is, you're trying your best to compensate for a feeling that's intolerable. To feel empty is to feel like you're near the gates of the wasteland. And you don't know the way out. Okay? We haven't done yet? I mean, in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about hungry ghosts, right? That's what that emptiness feels like. Hungry ghost. Constantly trying to fill the emptiness. There's a wonderful, I don't know if it's mythic, but I think it's mythic. I think Ovid wrote this down in like 2,500 years ago. The story of Eric Sigthon. People know that myth at all? Eric Sigthon. He was a king in Thessaly, and very reminiscent of our current administration. It was all about him. He had nothing to do. He didn't give a shit about the sacred, about the gods and goddesses. He had contempt for them. He also had contempt for the people. And ironically, he wanted to build this large hall to himself. Not naming any other names that might be doing the same thing. And so he sent his soldiers out to the forest to cut down the wood for this. And the forest was the forest of Demeter, the goddess of nature. And the soldiers were very reluctant to do this, but they were under orders. So every tree they chopped down bled. And at the heart of the forest was a tree that was Demeter's tree. And the soldiers refused. We can't do this. And the tree was massive, and it was decorated with all kinds of cloth offerings for prayers that had been answered to Demeter. So Eric Sigthon said, I'll do it myself. So he cut into the tree, felled the tree, and Demeter was pissed. And put a curse on him of endless hunger. He would never, ever, for the rest of his life, feel satisfied. So he began first by eating everything in the castle, then everything in the kingdom. He had a daughter that somehow, I can't remember exactly, she was also put into some kind of enchantment so she could change shapes constantly. So he sold her repeatedly to get more food. And then one day he was eating and he hit his own figure. And he began to consume his own body. And he ate himself. Isn't that where we are right now? An insatiable hunger for more. More. More is the primary theme of this culture, this society. We always want and need more. Now what could account for that? If not for some profound embedded feeling in your experience of feeling empty. We don't know about satiation. We don't know about satisfaction. We're always looking for the next thing. And on a social level, on a societal level, the symptoms are also there, right? As I was just saying, there's this consistent hunger for more. We are, without doubt, the most consumptive society on the planet. What they say is that at the current levels of consumption around the planet, we would need 1.5 Earths every year to meet the need But if everyone on the planet had the same appetite as we do in this country, we need 4.9 Earths. That's how much more we consume than the rest of the planet. Now, I guess part of the reason why that hunger is there is because we're not touching into the primary satisfaction. When you're here in this space, like this morning, the singing was exquisite. It was just, but not once while I was singing with you all was I thinking about buying my next car or my next cell phone. I was primarily satisfied in that moment. I was inside of primary satisfactions. I was inside of what the soul has expected and anticipated to be part of my daily life. When I write about primary satisfactions, I write about the fact that, what we expected, I write about this as the fourth gate of grief, what we expected and did not receive. And the fourth gate says that we were designed and shaped to be inside of village life. That when we woke up in the morning, like we did this morning, we walked up, I saw 70 pairs of eyes looking back at me, greeting me, hugging me, asking me how I was. How did I sleep? That's what we expected. And when we wake up, most times we wake up either alone, maybe we have a partner, but we don't have 40 pairs of eyes or 70 pairs of eyes looking back at us. And we interpret this again, not consciously, but we interpret this as a failure on some level. What did I do wrong? Because the expectation is there. So, do you get what I'm saying? The expectation is in our bodies to be inside village. And when that doesn't materialize, we go to therapy. What did I do wrong? What's wrong with me? How can I reconfigure this? We even have now gotten to the point where we praise consumption as being a good citizen. The very thing that's destroying the planet, we get praised for it. We got to keep that GDP going. Everything always has to be growing and increasing. And if we're not increasing, we're somehow failing to be a good society. That's how we're measured as GDP. Was it Bhutan now that it has the gross happiness index? Mm-hmm. That would be a wonderful switch, wouldn't it? If we were more concerned about the welfare of our people than how much they consume on a daily basis. We get very anxious when things go down, don't we? We get very frightened when GDP goes down or when we have to go see a doctor about our erectile dysfunction. We get very anxious when things go down. But that's also where we are. We reward these people. We reward the ones who have somehow succeeded in the material gains department, in the wealth department. They are the ones given prestige. They're the ones who get recognized. They're the ones who get assigned to cabinet posts. It isn't teachers or nurses or artists or poets. They are the ones being recognized or approved of collectively. Again, symptoms of emptiness. And it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see how this emptiness has extenuated itself out into colonization. Mm-hmm. And the ultimate expression of emptiness is empire. Mm-hmm. The conquest and claiming of other people's lives, land, and freedoms. Mm-hmm. So the colonization issue right now is really big. And we're looking at that finally. There's a beautiful movie I really encourage you to watch called The Eternal Song. Yep. How many of you have seen that? A couple of you. It's put up by SAND, Science and Non-Duality, dear friends of ours, Zion and Mauricio, not so. And what the film is about is, well, they did a film a couple of years ago called The Wisdom of Trauma, with Gabor Mate and others. And Gabor said to them, if you really want to do work around trauma, go to traditional indigenous cultures and ask them about the legacy of colonization. So they went to 12 communities, the Maasai and the Inuits and some native cultures here on this continent and Australia and New Zealand. And they interviewed them and they asked them, and the movie is painfully beautiful. It's painful to listen to our legacy of emptiness and how much it has caused tremendous suffering around the planet. Tremendous suffering. This all began out of the central territories of Europe and extended out across the planet, around the globe. What I loved about the movie, however, was that the eternal song never got extinguished. And somehow, in some miraculous way, these cultures, the song went underground, but it did not disappear. Our song did. We've lost the song. So all the, let's talk about appropriation. We know we need songs. We know we need ritual. We know we need myth and story, but we don't have it. So we go out and take it. Another colonization of traditions, of practices. We fail to trust even our own imaginations, to listen deeply enough to be informed by what rituals we need, what stories matter to us now. So I really want to encourage you all to watch that film.
Your name again?
The Eternal Song. And just last week we went to, then they did 12 additional films, which they're going to be releasing once a month. And we went to see the Maori film last Thursday. Whew. Again, the whole focus of the film is, what are the Maori doing to heal? Our focus is primarily on economics. How do we fill, not heal? How do we fill the gap? How do we fill that hunger? But we don't realize that the hunger is much more about, trying to get enough, what we don't need in our households, rather than how would we actually heal ourselves as a community, as a culture. That's what I love about this gathering, is that's the focus. Miguel's sharing last night in front of the fire was so moving because he's calling us back to that intimacy with the living world. That's part of what we're hungry for, is that feeling of connectivity and belonging.
Who's the group that did these films, you said?
SAND, Science and Non-Duality. Yeah, excellent group. So the values that come out of this emptiness around society and around empire and colonization are dominance, expansion, wealth, progress, power, and supremacy. That's quite a cocktail.
Can you read that word?
Dominance, expansion, wealth, progress, power, supremacy. And this is supremacy over other cultures, over other races, over women, over the marginalized, and over the earth itself. This is all the legacy of emptiness. Let's take a breath together. This is not light material, but it's really important that we look at it. It's really important that we try to digest this very uncomfortable truth, that we live in the shadow of this legacy of emptiness. So I just keep asking myself, what is it that could possibly compel a people to actively and in some sense willingly participate in the destruction of our own home. Jack Forbes is a Native American writer. He wrote Columbus and Other Cannibals. Great title. And he talked about the Wetico disease. How many of you remember that term, Wetico? Very few. Okay. Wetico has various iterations in multiple traditional indigenous cultures on this continent. Some of them call it Wendigo. There's different ways they speak about it. But it's basically how it's been translated now with Forbes was it's a kind of cannibalistic psychosis. And he says most of the European folks with the inheritance of that legacy are suffering from a cannibalistic psychosis. How else, again, can we explain this not for some kind of disease, some kind of mental disorder that would allow us to do this willingly, to participate? You know, as long as that emptiness is not addressed, we are going to be consistently participating in the destruction of our own home. So several years ago, I was asked to write the preface for a book called Choosing Earth by Dwayne Elgin. People know Dwayne. He wrote Voluntary Simplicity back in the 70s. He's written many books. And he said, I really want you to write this preface. And I did not want to write it because I had to read the book. And the book was not easy to read. What Dwayne has done, he's done this, he's been working on this material for 50 years or more. And what he's done is he's projected out over the next 5 decades what's the probable outcome for each of these decades. We're in for a difficult ride, friends. The level of suffering that's going to unfold over these decades is profound. It's profound. It's already, yes, it is. It is.
Can you say the book again?
Choosing Earth. And they're actually giving that book away if you want. It's go to choosingearth.org. You can get a free download of the book. Again, he's trying to look at that same thread of how our conditions reflex to our history is participating now in the ongoing demise of our planet. Yeah. So just, play out a few thoughts about where this emptiness might have arisen from. Okay? The very first kind of inflection where this might have begun is what cellist Glenn Denning calls the original trauma, when we began to sever our relationships to the sacred world, right around the agricultural time. And I brought in the name Paul Shepard the first time I spoke here in 2013. Paul Shepard talked about how we went from what he called the sacramental cosmos to a sacrificial world. Sacramental, everything becomes an icon of that sacrament, of the sacred. So we were in a relationship with that sacred world. When we devolved into dominance, which was you have to control plants, you have to control pests, you have to control predators to protect your livestock, we went into more of a sacrificial, trying to pray to the gods to protect them from trouble. So that devolved into a very different relationship than we had for 300,000 years. This move only happened 12 or 13,000 years ago. This is a blip on there. Someone said they had 100-foot long length of rope here. Who was that?
Jesse.
Jesse.
Yeah.
There was a wonderful little experiential practice that was done many years ago about laying out that 100-foot length of rope to represent 1,000,000 years of hominid evolution. And you begin walking from that 1,000,000-year mark, and for 99% of that rope, you're in an unmediated relationship to the world. Unbroken intimacy. I'm not saying it was easy, but there was no severance. Then you get down to the last 10 inches of that rope, agricultural sets in. The last 1 inch is the Industrial Revolution. The last 1/10 of an inch, or probably less than that, is technological realities. And we call that normal. As if that's the real world. Robert was saying before, the real world is the one that's missing us. And for us to return to that world is critical. The second possible source for this emptiness is the accumulated ancestral encounters with trauma through conquest and colonization. My brother, Art, is a genealogist. He loves studying genealogy. And the last time I was home, well, that was a couple of years ago, I went out to his house and he brought out all of the genealogy stuff. And he showed me one photograph from the town the Wellers came from in Germany. And I said, what is that? He said, well, it's the Black Gate. It was built in 76 AD by the Romans. So that's when it began. That's when the severing began. Because the indigenous traditions of that culture were basically stopped. They began to end at that point. And then the second invasion was the Christian invasion, when the beliefs and stories and practices were basically eliminated. So the severance, the trauma that's there, has lingered in our bodies, in our psychic lives. There's all this now, the studies of epigenetic transmission of trauma has become very, very well known. That what began in someone's body and someone's experience doesn't just end after their life, it is transmitted down the line.
Yep.
And we're living with that legacy in our bodies. In the ways that we are hesitant to connect, to trust, to rest, to relax, we're still living as if we're traumatized. The third contribution is a growing domestication of the animal body. How we try to kind of tame our own aliveness. Morris Berman wrote a book called Coming to Our Senses, The Hidden History of the Body in the West. Very important book. That's the first time I began reading about emptiness. He called it the void. That there's this felt sense of a void in our body. And he said it's quite physical, it's quite somatic. We actually feel this emptiness. The fourth one is the dominant ideology of individualism. This one emerged more in the Enlightenment, when we moved more from a village mind to an individualistic experience. We went from a collective identity to a solitary identity. And the more we feel and we feed that now collectively so much that we don't even really know how to think mutually. We don't know how to think like a village. Jeanette Armstrong was a Wampanoag elder. Do you know Jeanette? Let me know. Jeanette Armstrong was speaking about how in her village, their cosmology is built like this. Community first, family second, and individual third. She said you've inverted that completely, so it's individual first, family second, and she said you use the rhetoric of community all the time, but there's no blood in it. It's anemic, it's empty. You know, we talk about it all the time. You don't have to talk about it if you have it. So we're pointing a finger at the things that we're longing for. We're pointing a finger at the things that we're missing. Let me just add one more thing to that. Those wounds that we carry around this are typically carried in a very young part of us. So I just keep noticing, no matter where I was teaching, no matter what I was doing, everyone was looking for a place to belong. Did you ever notice that? In yourself? Always looking for a place to belong. It's a perfectly understandable and necessary longing, but it's also reflective of an adolescent position. Because at one point in our maturation, we have to become houses of belonging, rather than always looking for them. Can we become one? And we've become a place that actually invites connection and belonging. That's a part of our maturation, part of our development. And that all leads to what I call the erosion in original identity. On my screen here behind me, see the graphic? We paid, spared no expense. Let's imagine our identity was actually meant to be something quite immense. That we emerge out of mystery. So the first layer of that mystery is we become incarnate. We have a body. All right? We come out of mystery. I don't know where we come from. But we come into this mysterious flesh and blood experience. Now, in a functioning cosmology, in a functioning world, functioning culture, that body is embedded in a family structure, right? And that family structure is the first place where we encounter a felt sense of trust. That it's okay for me to be here. That it's safe for me to be here. That the invitation is for me to gradually open and unfold myself into the world. Now, in this functioning cosmology, that family is always embedded in a living community. We have heard that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to sustain a family.
Yep.
This idea of nuclear family, we should have gotten a clue when we named it that. It is not a good idea. They're too explosive. So the family has to be embedded in a living community. And for the community to thrive, they need clan life. They need initiated adults. And you're initiated not into something abstract, you're initiated into a particular spiritual responsibility, clan life. So there's the medicine clan, there's the salmon clan, there's the bear clan, there's the warrior clan. You're given a sense of why you're here. You're given a spiritual responsibility. Now that clan is there to feed the larger, what I call the last thread on this identity is cosmos. So that the cosmos itself is fed and kept alive by initiated human beings. Now, for the most part, what we've seen is the erosion of all of that. We've lost cosmos, we've lost clan life, community has become kind of abstract rhetoric. Family life, we have a pretty good clear, it's troubled, which usually leaves me with just me. And back to my own solitary life. Do you hear the emptying of that? And what does that leave us with? Again, trying to fortify an image, an identity that can possibly fit into a collective of other randomized, isolated human beings. Not a great situation. Not a great situation at all. So that erosion leaves the self basically threadbare. We've lost, in a sense, more than 4/5 of our original identity. What we were shaped to be inheriting has been all but deprived us in our life. And that's kind of been the focus of my life work, is to try to reanimate that larger sense of identity. Right? Individualism then ends up positing the self as separate and isolated from all others. We become, in a sense, essentially interiorized, private, a highly boundaried identity that is divided from the world out there. We don't feel the continuum. See, in a healthy individual, I remember working with a young couple once who came into my practice and they said, our daughter's really, really struggling with separation anxiety. That's normal, right? I said, no. It's not normal. That is a symptom of having too small a holding space for that child to feel safe in the world. 1 or 2 people is not enough. And it's too small of a containment field for a child to feel held, seen, recognized, valued, protected, cared for, held. So when that's missing, yeah, stranger anxiety becomes inevitable. We don't trust the world. It's not safe for me to unfold. It's not safe for me to reveal who I am to the world. Right? So this self that we are, in a sense, living more like in terms of solitary confinement, I'm relegated to a very separate life. And it lacks that rich inheritance that was once a composite self, a coextensive self, a deeply participatory identity that was entangled with the animate world. That's our inheritance. That's what we were designed to participate in. I can only keep thinking back and holding this in the context of absence. So for so many decades, 4 decades at least, I kept blaming myself for that emptiness. But what if the emptiness is that failure of culture? What if the absence is this profound amnesia that came out of that original trauma? We even forgot to think about this as necessary. Yeah. I do want to recognize that I hope and I trust that many of you out here are not struggling with these same troubles.
No one here ever.
Don't cross that off.
Rare exception.
We're not. Okay. So even if we have at least some modicum of that sense of belonging, and some sense of what Miguel was pointing a finger at last night, and Joel, his beautiful offering of the Thanksgiving prayer, and some part of us is trying to remember that we belong here. Not just that we belong here, that we are necessary. That the cosmos itself requires our participation. I like what Robert said in Creation Continues. We have, I think, the only mythology, I believe, I'm not sure, but that ended after 6 days. No. Most other traditions say that creation is ongoing. And it's up to us. It's like the Aboriginal dancers. You see them doing that really animated dance of pounding the earth with their feet. What they're doing is taking the energy of the sun and moving it through their body to impregnate the earth to keep it green. Or the Pueblo people who get up before dawn every day and run and sing to bring the sun up. So that's a sense of cosmological significance. You are needed. And again, that the legacy of that emptiness draws us always interior, looking for flaws, looking for ways to make us better. And as Hillman would say, our psychic energy has been drained from the world. And the symptoms of the world, the troubles of the world, are in great part because of that withdrawal of our energy, our attention, our affection. Wendell Berry said that all turns on affection. It all turns on affection.
What do you mean it all turns?
The condition of the planet, the condition of our communities, depends upon a heart enamored with that, in love with the community, in love with the world. Emptiness really impacts our capacity to feel affection. Let's see. How are we doing time-wise? So Wednesday? Sunday noon. Can we go a little longer?
Yeah, please.
The effects of this ideology and the effects of emptiness. I've already...
You got another point.
Okay. That includes questions?
Yeah, it does.
No? Damn.
Total.
Total. Okay. The first impact is we lost a cosmological sense of belonging and being. So like I said, when our gaze narrowed to the interior, we began to encapsulate and domesticate the self from the world, we lost the living world. In a sense, we broke a certain covenant with the world. Really, the basic agreement was the earth would provide and we would say thank you. And we would practice something that almost does not exist in this society, which is restraint. We wouldn't take too much. There's a lot of myths and fairy tales and stories about taking too much, especially among Native Americans, myths and stories. There's all these precautionary stories about don't take too much. The word restraint almost doesn't appear in our language. It's always about getting more. We have this certain sense of entitlement that I deserve this. I remember writing a piece about initiation saying that the initiated human being is more aware of responsibilities than rights, more aware of entanglements than entitlements. You know, we hear those words a lot in the rhetoric of the society. My right. I have a right. Well, yeah, you do, but where's your responsibility? Where's your responsibility to the community? To the watershed? To bringing the salmon back? You know, I have a right to take what I want, to have what I want. But again, that idea of restraint, I wrote a whole essay for that in my new collection on the value and necessity of restraint. So in essence, we have exchanged a cosmology of connection with an identity of separation. Our solitary confinement was established. We lost that sense of living culture, of a robust ritual life, of traditions, of sacred sites, of stories, of initiations. We also lost and forgot the language of intimacy and the cadence of courtship between the human and the more than human world, between the human and the sacred world. Remember that passage I shared with you in 2013 from Paul Shepard about where you said that the grief and sense of loss that we often attribute to a failure in our personality is actually a feeling of emptiness where a beautiful and strange otherness should have been encountered.
Say that again.
You know, the grief and sense of loss that we often attribute to a failure in our personality. See, we're back to that same dilemma, blaming ourselves for feeling empty. The grief and sense of loss that we often attribute to a failure in our personality is actually a feeling of emptiness, where a beautiful and strange otherness should have been encountered. So when the world dims from our attention, and that strange otherness is no longer part of what we're drawn to be connected to, we feel empty again. Every one of these layers contributes to that collective interior feeling of being empty. And even the rituals of reciprocity, Miguel used that language last night. Reciprocity. That the agreement is to say thank you again. Remember Brian Swim, the mathematical cosmologist, who with Thomas Berry wrote some wonderful books about the universe story, was giving a talk in San Francisco. And I remember he was being asked the question, why are humans here? We don't seem to serve any meaningful purpose. But the earth would be better off if we had never been created. And he said, no. We were put here to gawk. To gawk. He said, we were put here to be amazed.
Yeah.
To be stunned by this beautiful thing. And he said the only thing that was required of us was to say thank you. That was the covenant. You have to say thank you. And Meister Eckhart said if the only prayer he ever uttered was thank you, that would suffice. So to keep gratitude on our lips, in our hearts, that everything is a gift. When you feel empty, you don't see the gift. You're just trying to fill the hole. So you don't have to feel that way. So some of us call this the Anthropocene, right? Where humans have become the absolute center of everything. You know, Thomas Berry would say that we have become a singular species only talking to itself. So we don't talk to mouse or coyote or fox or raven. We don't have these relationships right now. I don't know why I'm going to tell you this story, but I remember sitting in our front yard. I live in the woods as well, you know, the same fire danger that Robert was speaking of. We've evacuated twice in the last 5 years. But sitting in our yard with a friend, and this fox comes prancing up the drive and looks at us and proceeds to jump up on a picnic table and push crap right on our bowl. Yeah, okay.
Nice.
I hear you. Yes. Could have been a commentary, I don't know. Anyway, the Anthropocene. But E.O. Wilson, the biologist, said we actually are living in the Eremocene, the age of loneliness. Again, when we stop talking to the world, we become exceedingly lonely. Exceedingly lonely. The experience of our identities has been so reduced to a fragment of its full inheritance. And that reduction, again, leaves us emptied. We have forgotten that we are part raven, part moon, part antelope, part white pine, part oak savanna. We become so insulated in our sense of self. One of the most beautiful practices you could sense from traditional folks was that ability to shapeshift and become other. Right? There's so many stories about that in the fairy tale. We don't think about that anymore. Our attention has become almost exclusively economic. And when you lose village, when you lose that collective connective tissue, it's always up to you to survive. And one of the most obscene phrases in our culture is that you have to earn a living. Isn't that obscene? That your living isn't just the gift of you being in the world, that you have to keep earning that over and over again. Every day, every year. Yeah. So the animals and trees, for the most part, I mean, again, I want to just honor the beautiful work like Joel and others of trying to keep our attention attuned to that larger conversation. But for the most part, collectively on this continent, that is not the conversation we're having. And so those epiphanies, those revelations of the other world, of the natural world, are not happening, except sometimes in dreams. We'll have animals appear in our dreams. Or they somehow come in intuitions, or maybe moments of imagination. So they still are there. And without this wider sense of self, we are left bereft, and so we indeed suffer from that great loneliness, that felt sense of emptiness. And our attempts to cope with this emptiness often take the shape of trying to fill the void and to fill the hollowness. We try to possess, grasp, colonize everything, as if we could somehow alleviate this feeling by the ability to dominate it. So what is the way home? You've been all waiting for that part, right?
Yeah.
Well, out of time, sorry. Go to www.
You got 5 minutes.
Let's talk about that. The first responsibility we have is to acknowledge the profound grief that comes with this emptiness. Remember, Martine said we should weep for 1,000 years into this hole. You know, we have to grieve the consequences of this emptiness, this loneliness, this sense of disconnection. What we're actually doing is trying to acknowledge the mass forgetting, the deep intrinsic amnesia that we're dealing with. So we have to slow down. We live in a very manic culture, and to get in touch with this grief requires an absolute dedication to slowness. I believe some of you may have read my book and heard me talk about my mentor, Clark Berry, that I mentioned earlier. I was licensed very young. I was 27 years old when they gave me a license to sit with people. It's crazy. But I was smart enough to know I didn't know anything about sitting with people. And so I went to the Young Institute in San Francisco. I called them, asked them for a list of analysts in the area, and I began to call around. And when I talked to Clark, I think I want to sit with this guy. This guy sounds right. So I showed up at his doorstep, and he opened the door, and damn, he looked ancient. He must have been 60. Fairly surprised he could stand up. But we sat down, and he reached over and he patted this big rock he had by his desk, by his chair. He said, "This is my clock. I operate at geologic speed. And if you're going to work with the soul, you've got to learn this rhythm. Because this is how the soul moves." He pointed at his clock and said, "It hates this." That's the only thing that has made me understand the work of that room. I tell everybody I sit with that story. Because we are so far outstripping the pace of soul in this manic-driven society. James Romney has said that depression is the soul's refusal to participate in manic culture.
Say that again.
Depression is the soul's refusal to participate in manic culture. So when we get out of that mania, when we can slow down enough, and part of the reason why we stay moving fast is we don't want to feel what's in this body. You know, we don't want to register the pain and suffering and ultimately that emptiness that's there. It is not fun. And the worst part about having to confront this is that we're often asked to do it in isolation. Do it alone. And I can tell you, I think that's impossible. We might be able to see it, but to engage it, to work it, to grieve it, that's going to be requiring community, which is where we're going to be heading later in this week in our ritual work. Let's see. We also must gradually remember our deep time ancestral inheritance that still lingers inside our psyches. Carl Jung had a phrase that most of our troubles come from loss of touch with the instincts, what he called the age-old unforgotten wisdom at the core of the psyche. That's hopeful. The unforgotten wisdom at the core of the psyche. I can tell you many, many times when we've done a grief ritual or a gratitude ritual or any of the rituals that have come to us, at the end of it somebody might say something like, I've never, ever done anything like this before. But it felt oddly familiar. Right? And when we go through rituals, the psyche recognizes that cadence that rhythm, that invitation towards revelation to show ourselves. And we're hungry for that invitational space, that frequency. So that's inside of us still. Even though we're dealing with the emptiness that's come from the severing of that sense of inheritance from our ancestral ground, we still possess the shaping of the human psyche over 300,000 years. That's still there, the unforgotten wisdom at the core of the psyche. And when we slow down and pay attention, those rhythms are available. Those patterns are available. So when we start singing together, when we drum together, when we do the gratitude prayer, the Thanksgiving address, some part of us goes, that frequency feels right. Even if you've never done it before. The frequency coheres with the expectation in the psyche. What we're trying to do is to remember what we have forgotten. And I would say that remembrance is an act of resistance. Remembering itself is an act of resistance against the greater part of this obsession with progress. Bayo Kamalafe, the Nigerian, I don't know what to describe him as, a philosopher, psychologist.
Yes.
Yeah. If you don't know his work, he's fun just to listen to.
Yeah.
Bayo says, to be modern is to be in a constant state of ornamenting our exile. Constantly changing the wallpaper to screen out the jarring effects of the world of mass forgetting. Can you hear that again?
What's his name?
Bayo, B-A-Y-O, Kamalafe, A-K-O-M-O-L-A-F-E. Bayo Kamalafe says, to be modern is to be in a constant state of ornamenting our exile. That's great. Constantly changing the wallpaper to screen out the jarring effects of this world, of the world, a mass forgetting. So slowing downward is one of the primary practices of remembering. The body has a knowing. The body has a remembering of what it feels like to hug, to sing, to weep, to be near each other in times of gratitude or sorrow. It is a gesture of attunement that helps us recall our wild entanglement with this sensuous and singing world. Our grief is really rooted in this persistent fiction of separation and emptiness. So ironically, we're kind of in this period of what I would call kind of a strange grace, when all the fictions of individualism are collapsing. COVID was kind of the strange way that we began to recognize that we're all in this together, that no one is immune. I think all fantasies of immunity are collapsing right now, as if somehow I'm separate from what's happening with glaciers or with species or with refugees or with Gaza or anything, that somehow I'm separate from that. Oh, that fantasy is collapsing radically. And that's also generating kind of a bifurcated response. One is to return to 1950. All of the things about trying to put people in their right places. They could be able to color in their right place, women in their right place.
When we were on top of the world.
When we were on top of the world. And the other response is becoming, as Joel said today, remembering our humility. We have entered the long dark, and we are in a period of absolute humility. We don't know what to do. There's a wonderful term that comes out of the Inuit people called Kartsaluni. Q-A-A-R-S-T-I-L-U-N-I, Kartsaluni. The word literally translates sitting quietly together in the darkness, waiting expectantly for something creative to burst forth. And I think that's where we are right now. Sitting quietly together in the darkness, waiting expectantly for something creative to burst forth. This was done by the whalers. They couldn't go out to hunt a whale until the whales gave them a song. There's that restraint. There's that humility. There's that reciprocity. We won't take any of you until you say it's okay. To help feed our people, we need one of you. We can't come until you say, okay, here's the song you must sing to us. Isn't that beautiful? Again, we don't have those practices yet. But the intuition says that's right. We need to slow down, to get quiet. The long dark is an invitation towards imagination, towards gestation, towards incubation, towards deep listening. That's the requirement of this time. That piece I wrote for Dwayne, I spoke about the long dark in there, that we're not going to see, I should say it differently. This is going to be probably at least 2 generations long before we maybe make it through that narrow passageway. You know? So at least 2 generations, 50 years at least. And judging from what I see, most of us will not make it to the other side. But this is the time for us to plant a lot of seed. This is not the time to kind of consolidate interiorly, but to participate in the generation of imagination and putting the seeds out. This conference is one of those seeds. There's this lovely idea that came my way from Kathleen Dean Moore, an ecological environmental philosopher out of the University of Oregon. The term is refugia, R-U-F-U-G-I-A, refugia. And the term is actually a scientific term. She went out to Mount St. Helens with a group of scientists, I think 20 or 30 years after the blast. The scientists thought, without any doubt, that they would find nothing. That the landscape would be barren because the blast was so, the debris field was sometimes 10, 20 feet deep. That how could anything possibly be there? When they got there, they found a lot of life. Little leaves that where a log might have been that covered the space, little ferns would be growing in there. Little signs of mold activity or lichen. Something was there. And the scientists called it refugia. Small places of safety where life endures. Small places of safety where life endures. Maybe these metaphors, carcellini, refugia, these are important for us to know that we can have ways of, in the old, I think in the 14th century, monasteries were this.
Yeah.
Places where the arts were kept alive. So we need places like that. Again, this is one of those places. That's what brought me back here. Beauty. I think someone shared that poem this morning. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and scared. There's emptiness again. We wake up empty and scared. Don't go into that study and begin reading. Take down the musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to be able to kiss the ground. And that's a good act of humility and affection. To kneel and kiss the ground. We kiss what we love, right? So beauty. This returns us to primary satisfaction. This is the last thing I'll share with you. Coming back to primary satisfactions. What is it? How did we evolve? Successfully, mind you. Otherwise we would not be here. We evolved because of success, not failure. And the success of our species was based on certain qualities that allowed for cohesion and maturation. So, ritual life, we expected that, we need that. Communal life, ample amounts of beauty, stories that enchant and educate, elders that can help foster and fortify our maturation, being able to grieve together, to give thanks together, to share meals together, to bring our dreams together, to support living culture. These are all primary satisfactions. And when we're inside of them, we do not crave to participate in the emptying of the world. Again, I remember many times when I was doing the men's initiation work with my brothers out there, Mark and Ed and Jake, all went through initiation with the Men of Spirit Project years ago. I remember those weekends so vividly because we were inside of that space. Everything we longed for was there. We sang together all the time. We wept together, we held each other. We supported one another. We listened so attentively to each other that we could begin to distinguish the unique medicine each man carried. So they could once again feel that they weren't empty. They possessed medicine, which we all do. That we could then bless the community with what we could find inside of our own soul. Your soul did not arrive here empty. That I know. But when you feel empty, you forget the soul. And you become fixated on self. Even psychology is loaded with this terribly. There's no psyche left in psychology. We have selfology. How to fortify the self. Look at the language in psychology. Mastery, boundaries. I mean, the language itself tells us that we've left the territory of soul. And that's what we have to return to. Well, brothers, I think I'm there for right now.